title of my sermon today is going to be The Good and Faithful Servant. And if you guys can open up to Matthew 25. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard this story before. So it's Matthew 25, verse 14, and on until we hit verse 30. So it's a lot of reading. It's the parable of the talents. Okay, again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents of money, to another 2 talents, and to another 1 talent, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received the 5 talents went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more. So also the one with 2 talents gained 2 more. But the man who had received the 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received the 5 talents brought another 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things, and I'll put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Verse 22, the man with the 2 talents also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 talents. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, and good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things, and I'll put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. And then the man who had received the 1 talent came. Master, he said, I knew you're a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your talent in the ground. See, here's what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed? Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. Take the talent from him and give to the one who has the 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Did anybody catch that? It's a long chapter. Anyway, so and then I'll just quickly read a part of Zechariah 4:10. It says, do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. And so, but today my main message, it lies in this parable of the talents. If we kind of look over it, there was these 3 men, right? They were all different, and their master, he gave them different talents, and here it's talking about money. He gave them different talents because it says it's based on their abilities, because they were all different people. I want to point out something before I go on, is that each one of them had a talent. So that means each one of them was called to do something. In the same way, you and I were different, right? Nobody can turn to their neighbor and say, wow, you look just like me, right? That's not it. But, we're all different, and we're given these different abilities and talents. When I was writing this message, I was like, not everybody, I started thinking about, like, the things that people do in church, like the way Slave plays the guitar, right? Can everybody agree? Yeah. He's a good guitar player. I can listen to it for a long time, and I'm not saying that because I'm related to him. I just think he plays good. Not everybody's such a great singer or such a great preacher, even though everybody should be a preacher in different ways, not just on stage. And that's because we're different people. Right. But we are all called to do something specific. Right. I don't know if you guys know this or not. Maybe some people that are closer to me know this, but if I was put on the drums for some odd reason, I can't, for some reason, I can't keep a beat when on the drums. I can hear, like, when somebody's singing wrong or right, but if you put me on the drums, I would, start with, slow tempo, speeding up to, techno, because I have 0 skill in that. It's just some, little confession. That's why everybody has their own abilities, has different things. Going back to the Bible, Jesus, before he was heading up to the Father, he, in Mark 16:15, he said, and I'm paraphrasing, that we should go into all the world and we should preach the gospel, right? And he is like this master. You know, he left us the Holy Spirit to guide us until he comes back. You know, he left us here to do something specific, and that's very direct. So my question to us today is, what are you doing with what God has given you? No matter how big or how small it is, you must use it, right? We have heard of the saying, use it or lose it. And, you know, I've heard people say to me personally, they've said, oh, I don't have a talent. I don't think I can do anything. So what am I supposed to do? So tell me what I'm supposed to do. But for some reason, I think it's just an excuse sometimes to be lazy. You know, if you say, hey, I'm talentless, that's a lot easier to say than to go to pursue God, to find out who God is, and to find out what he wants you to do. You know, we are degrading and limiting God if we say we don't have any ability to serve him. Because, once again, I'll be repeating myself 100 times here, he has given something to all. You know, later on when we read about that lazy servant, how he was talking to his master, you know, it made me think about, I even wrote down here, does he know who his master is? You know, we must know, which leads me on to like one of my points, is we must know who our master is above all else. That's the first thing. You know, this way we know his heart and his desires for us. So the only way, well, not the only way, sorry, but one of the greatest ways to know who our master is through reading his word, right? Is through reading the Bible. And if you guys can open up to Hebrews 12:2. If you are there, say you there, so I could read it. Okay, it says, let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. And you can even underline that. He's the author and perfecter of our faith. You know, I know who my master is. I know that my master, he's a perfect and loving God. And this way, because I know who he is, I know the desires he has for me. I know the abilities and the talents he has given me to spread the gospel. And I know that because it's specific to me. And once you know him, you know the specifics he has for you. And I'm sorry we're kind of jumping around here, but when we go back to Matthew, because this is where my message lies, Matthew, we're going to read verse 24 real quick. It's just really quick. So it's talking about the lazy servant. He said, Master, I knew you're a hard man. You know, because this man, or this lazy servant, as that's what the Bible names him, because he didn't know the master the way he ought to, he didn't know the value of the talent that was given to him by the master, and that's why he buried it. And just curiosity, have you guys ever buried anything in your life? Yeah? Your hamster. Okay, yeah, people, hopefully, well, that was valuable, I bet, to you. It's probably your friend. You know, when I was 9, 10 years old, I lived in this Russian community called Springwood. Did anybody live there? My Springwood people? Anyways, so my friends and I, when I was little, or less little, we watched this really girly movie, and there the girls buried their valuable things. So we decided, hey, great idea, let's bury our valuable things in a box. So anyway, and we decided to do this in the front lawn. And if you live in Springwood, the front lawn is like a tiny little square with a little bit of dirt, and that's where the moms plant the flowers. And I was really bright, so I was like, let's bury in my front lawn. And the funny thing is, the box was so big they could actually see it from the outside. Anyway, that's not my point. But it didn't last long. We opened it 2 days later. So, but thank God we did that, because we'd probably get in trouble when our moms noticed valuable things from the house. And I want us to analyze our life by this. and to see maybe you buried something that's so valuable that God has given you. Look if is it hiding in your front lawn? Like, did you dig a hole up just like this lazy servant did, and you put it there? You know, are you hiding it because maybe you don't know how to use it? Maybe you're afraid what others will say or what God will think of you. And I just want to say that God calls us to be bold and courageous, right? In everything we do, no matter how big or how small the talent or ability is. You know, if God has given you the ability to greet people, because we often underestimate the little things, right? If he has given you the ability to greet people, and like when you greet people, they're so happy, be the best greeter there is in the world, you know? If you're the one who cleans up after church and you're like, well, nobody notices, so it's such a small little thing that I do, be the best cleaner-upper there is. You know, use your ability, be organized, love and help people, you know, be great in in the abilities that God gave you. Be great in your arena. Is that one of your sermons? Yeah. So, anyway, and God calls us here to be faithful in everything that we do. You know, don't take the abilities that God has given you with you to the grave. You know, when we're faithful, even in the smallest things, more will be given to you. And in verse 21, it says that his master replied, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things, and I'll put you in charge of many things." Nothing ever starts out great, and sorry to break it to you, but this is maybe a word of encouragement for some people, but you know, there are small steps that you must take first in order to get to the greater ones, and that takes time. You know, if you've ever seen little kids learning how to walk, they take like tiny little steps first, and then their body learns, and then they, you know, take bigger steps, and then they end up running. Nobody's born, you know, as soon as their feet hit the ground, nobody's born, they don't go running off. That's not possible, you know? And often, like in Zechariah, as I read, often these small beginnings are hard, right? They're the most difficult. But the Bible says that do not despise these small beginnings. You know, don't underestimate the little abilities and talents that God gives you. And you should never give up. Even if you're afraid, even if you fall and sometimes hurt yourselves, you never should give up. You know, kind of going back to Matthew, I'm sure it took some trial and time and error for these two guys, right, that were the faithful servants, to multiply the talents that were given to them by their master. But the whole point is that they did multiply them. And they were blessed with something more. You know, our life, it is truly short. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I think the older you get, the faster time flies. You know, but our master and our God, he has left us here, not alone, but with a mission, right? And his spirit to guide us. He left us with a mission to be his hands and his feet. Maybe in different forms, right? We're all different. We, like I said, different abilities. Whether you're preaching the gospel by speaking here on stage, at home, by singing, anything. You know, but ask yourselves if you are truly faithful to God, even in the little things. Are you faithful to his word? Are you reading his word? Oh, it's such a big problem. Like, it's a little thing, right, to read the word daily, but how many of us actually don't do it? You know? You know, are you faithful to the promises that he has? Are you faithful to the commitments that you have made with God? You know, and while I wrap up, like I said, it won't be too long. I just want to kind of go over the main points. And the first point is, once again, know your master. Know who has called you to a greater purpose. Know who has blessed you with the abilities and the talents. And know that you're called, and know the value of your calling. You know, like I said, use your calling to the best of your ability, no matter how big, how small, but you will be blessed with greater things. You know, and you will be, like, God knows our heart. So how do I say it? Well, you won't be blessed with greater things if you want to exalt yourself, because God doesn't call, you know, you to be exalted. He wants to be exalted through us. And Matthew 25:28 says, "Take that talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Now, I don't want to end here on this kind of sour part, but ask yourselves, what is it exactly that you want to hear from God when your life ends? What do you expect when you stand in front of him? Just think about it. What do you want to hear from him? Well done, my good and faithful servant, or throw that worthless servant outside. This is not some kind of a threat. This is just simply a word of warning to us. That we must use and multiply the talents that God gives us. And I'm not talking about financial talents. I'm talking about spiritual talents. Or our life is going to waste. And I've mentioned this before in my previous sermons, but it just won't leave my heart. Because if we're not doing what God has given us to do, then what are we doing? What is the point of our life if we're not following and working on the abilities that God has given us? We live a life that is worthless, and just like this worthless servant. I mean, he got the name worthless servant because he didn't do what his master left him to do. But there's hope. And I want to encourage you guys today to either get to know who your master is, get to know our God and the calling that he has for you. Maybe it's time for us to realize the value of our calling, or maybe you already dug that calling up, or not dug it up, you buried that calling, and it's time to dig it up today. Tonight is that time for us to take that first step. And as I invite our worship team back up, I'd like to read from Isaiah 55:6. So if you guys can open up, tonight will just be kind of a time for us to spend more time with God in worship and in prayer. So if you're there, I'll start reading. It says, "Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call on him while he is near." It is simple and to the point. In our life, our years just fly by. And I want you guys to know that in order to be that good and faithful servant, you must live a life that is worthy to be called that good and faithful servant. To at the end of it all, to hear from God, "Well done."